Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cherry Kubota. I'm a professor at the Ohio State University. I'm one of the members who are organizing this Indoor Ag Science Café, which is funded by USDA SCRI program. And the group of faculty members in Michigan State University, Ohio State, Purdue University, and then University of Arizona, together working to make the leafy green in indoor production more sustainable and more profitable. So this is an outreach program. The idea is to exchange information, science-based, and then also helping each other if you can, and then move the entire industry forward. So that's the idea of doing this. If you are new to this group, welcome to Indoor Ag Science Cafe, and then we are doing this monthly. All right, so just giving a near future program. So today we will have a Professor Neil Mattson from Cornell University talking 2 topics. And then next month we have 2 economists from Michigan State University talking about the consumer survey of the indoor ag produce, greenhouse, and then also indoor vertical farm produce. And then the May Cafe, we have sort of a little bit of engineering stuff, CFD 101, to learn the basics of the computational fluid dynamics. And then June Cafe is going to be our second indoor farming technology showcase. And then I have 2 companies right now confirmed, and then a couple more openings. So if you are interested in sort of show off your new technology using this opportunity, please let me know. And then I'm happy to talk about that opportunity. All right, with that, today, happy to have Dr. Neil Mattson, who is a professor at Cornell University, who is leading the Controlled Environment Agriculture program in Cornell. And he's going to talk about 2 topics. One is a very useful tool, calculator tool for estimating light fixtures, number of light fixtures and electrical costs. And then also another topic, which is very, very hot topic, thoughts on far-red radiation. So I'm going to stop here sharing. And then Neil.
I'll share my screen. Thank you for the introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here today. My outline for the less than half-hour time that I have before a discussion, I'm going to introduce Project LAMP, Lighting Approaches to Maximize Profit, that these 2 topics that I'll talk about were conducted under. I'm going to introduce, you may well be aware of Design Lights Consortium and their horticultural lighting label. In particular, I wanted to talk about that because it shows you for more than 600 horticultural lights, their specifications in terms of their energy use, their light output, things like that. And knowing those parameters will be important for the lighting calculator tool, which I'll then show off this simple, easy to use Excel lighting calculator tool. And we'll go through a couple example scenarios to show perhaps the benefits of the tool. And then I'm going to talk about research that we've done in our group under Project LAMP, looking at far-red responses of lettuce and basil, and a little bit more about physiological mechanisms of far-red radiation. So what is Project LAMP? Lighting Approaches to Maximize Profit is a 5-year USDA Specialty Crops Research Initiative funded project. It's led by Mark Van Eersel at the University of Georgia. And then it's multidisciplinary, and we have researchers, many from the University of Georgia that are Mark's colleagues. We have also participation at Rutgers, Cornell, Colorado State, University of Florida, Utah State, and the USDA ARS. And our overall objectives are to help you make the best possible decisions regarding supplemental and sole source lighting. So we attempt to address both greenhouse and plant factory cropping systems, as well as covering both floriculture and vegetable crops. And for today, I'll talk about our work that relates to sole source lighting in keeping with the indoor ag theme. So we integrate horticulture, engineering, and economics, and we develop hardware, so like lighting control systems and algorithms, decision support systems, and then just overall testing plant responses to light. So we can help walk growers through does supplemental lighting make sense in their case? If so, how to make the best decision to maximize your profits. You can find us online at hortlamp.org. And we all are also active on Facebook, LinkedIn, and ResearchGate as well. So just a little bit of a preface related to selecting a lighting fixture for indoor agriculture. Here's all these different considerations that we need to take into account. One of the big ones, of course, relates to the energy use. And so the PPE, the photosynthetic photon efficacy, which is micromoles of photons of light output per joule of electricity. And a related unit is sometimes used, which is moles per kilowatt hour. So that's micromoles per joule times 3.6 ends up giving you moles per kilowatt hour. But typically we refer to PPE in micromoles per joule. Of course, the initial cost, so that would be knowing the number of fixtures that you need to have, as well as the price per fixture and any installation costs. Those are important to know. The lifespan, so these fixtures will lose a little bit of output over time. And so typically we report Q90, which is the number of hours that you can operate the fixture until it's lost 10% of its light output. So it still uses the same amount of energy, but it only gives you 90% of the original output. So ideally, we want that to be as long as possible to maximize the economic value. In typically the non-LED world, then we also think about the bulb replacement cost and how often we have to replace that. Most of the LED fixtures we have on the market, there's not like LED lamps that you can replace, but you have to replace the whole fixture. So the installation cost, the uniformity of the lighting plan, so are there pockets of low light or high light? And then in some applications, we think about the specific light quality that we're providing, and far red could be an example of that. So I'll talk about this lighting calculator tool in a moment, but a question that I commonly get from growers is what are horticultural LEDs that I should consider? There's so many on the market. What are their specifications as well? And so in a sense, the Design Lights Consortium has made things easy in that they maintain a list of horticultural lighting qualified products. And so this is a list of fixtures, horticultural lighting fixtures that have been registered with the DLC to meet several minimum requirements. And I'll present those in a moment. These are fixtures designed for North American electrical capacity and voltage. This list gets used by many utility companies to decide if a lighting fixture qualifies for energy efficiency incentive. So it has to meet some type of energy efficiency threshold, and many companies have decided that they go to this list to see if something qualifies. Then the specification is revised periodically, so it becomes more rigorous over time. So that will hopefully help elevate the standards that we have of horticultural lighting. So the current standards that we have, and I think we're now on version 2.1 in terms of registering new lighting fixtures, is that they have to have a minimum PPE of 1.9 micromoles per joule. I should note that the Design Lights Consortium uses the standard definition of PPE, which is photons of light between 400 and 700 nanometers. So they've currently decided not to include far red, although we'll talk about later, there are photosynthetic benefits and morphological benefits of far red. But currently, those are not included in their definition of photosynthetic photon efficacy. They do require reporting on the photons of light that you get in far red. So at least you can look at a fixture and know if you're going to get some far red from that. They currently require a Q90 of greater or equal to 36,000 hours. So you should be able to operate the fixture for 36,000 hours and still have 90% of your original output. They've set the driver lifetime and the fan lifetime as greater or equal to 50,000 hours. And their warranty for the fixture is for 5 years or more, and for the lamp itself of 3 years or more. And if you go to, it would be under QPL qualified products list for designlights.org /horticulture. And you can see that there are currently 652 light fixtures registered, which is pretty amazing. It's grown very fast since they've introduced this certification process. You can search by manufacturer. You can search by different product features. I like that they list both the tested performance criteria, so that's submitted by the company, as well as the DLCs. So the DLCs tested performance criteria, as well as the criteria that's reported by the company itself. So you could search by PPE, by that energy efficacy, for example, and see which fixtures are going to meet the efficacy that you're looking for example. And then once you've selected a fixture to look at, there's a bunch of product information. Here I'm just pointing out a few that are going to be relevant to the lighting calculation discussion. So we have PPE reported here. This particular fixture is 2.51. And we have the photon flux, which is the total photons of light that this puts out, 783 micromoles per second. And then the input power, the watts that the fixture requires, which is 312 in this case. And these are 3 pieces of information that if you know 2 of them, you can calculate the third. For example, if we know the photon flux is 783, we divide that by the input power, which is 312, we can calculate that the PPE is 2.51. So let me turn to the lighting calculator tool. So if you go to hortlamp.org and then to our outreach section of our page, from there you can find the tab on determining lighting. And we have several different calculator tools that we have there. The one that I'm going to talk about today is how many light fixtures do you need? There's another great tool, the lamp lighting cost calculator. This one's more relevant to greenhouses, and I won't talk more about it other than showing this slide. So this one takes into account the background ambient light that you get from the sun. So you would input your zip code and it would use historical data. You would also input your DLI target, the greenhouse transmissivity, the electricity cost, and then the surface area of your greenhouse, and it will calculate to obtain that target DLI for each day of the year. It'll calculate your monthly lighting costs. So that's a really nice tool. If you want to learn more about that one, I believe Mark Van Eersel is actually giving a talk today, this afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern for the American Floral Endowment on this topic. So we'll return to this simple Excel spreadsheet tool that I developed, which does calculations on how many light fixtures do you need. And some caveats about this tool are that it simply does numerical calculations. So based on the light output from a fixture and some of these parameters that you enter, it estimates how many fixtures you need to provide that total amount of light, and then also calculating the number of the amount of electricity that you would use in a year. What this tool does not tell you is the arrangement that the light fixtures need to be placed, and it doesn't tell you, it doesn't like map the light. It doesn't tell you the uniformity of light coverage and so on. So you would need to work with the lighting supplier. But this tool does really great back of the envelope math to help you, say, compare fixtures to see which one might make the most sense economically in my facility. So the spreadsheet has these yellow highlighted boxes, which are inputs that you will need to add. So here's a hypothetical fixture, which is a light bar that would be used in vertical farm racks. And so I've input values, assuming we have a target light intensity of 250 micromoles per meter squared per second. I'm going to assume that that's on for 18 hours a day, year round. So total, we can get an average daily light integral of 16.2 moles per meter squared per day. So this would be a pretty good target for a leafy greens crop like head lettuce, for example. So we input the target light intensity, the lamp power consumption, which we can get from the manufacturer or from the DLC database, the area that I'm lighting, 10,000 square feet, the photon efficacy, which I again get from the lighting manufacturer from the DLC database. Here's one that you have to do some estimating on, which is the percent of light lost from edge effects. And so the more perimeter space your growing area has, the more potential there is for light loss to extend beyond the plant canopy and be wasted light. So we have to make some assumption there. We also input the costs that we're paying for electricity, in this case, the 12 cents per kilowatt hour, and the cost of the individual fixture. So these are $120 per bar for this hypothetical example. Then the output, so the spreadsheet does these calculations. So it tells us how many square meters we're lighting. It tells us the output of the lamp in micromoles per second. That's one of the calculations I talked about, where if you know those two things, you can calculate the third. It calculates the number of light fixtures you would need if you don't consider edge effects. And then if you do consider edge effects, based on the lighting fixtures that you need, assuming edge effects, we calculate the total cost of those light fixtures. And again, that's not installation costs unless you added that into the price of the light fixture. And then to operate in this case, 6,570 hours a year, which is at 18 hours a day, we're going to take 770,000 kilowatt hours of electricity. So we have the electricity cost then at 12 cents per kilowatt hour, and then the electricity cost per square foot per year and per square meter per year. So one take-home message is there's a lot of electricity to light our crops, and this doesn't account for the HVAC cost as well. If you're into math and want to know the underlying equations behind the spreadsheet, they're super simple. And actually, I make the students in my hydroponics class that I teach at Cornell do these calculations manually. I put together an extension bulletin that describes it. I talked about it in terms of adding supplemental light in a greenhouse, but the same math takes place in an indoor farm. And you can find that at egrow.org and search for how many light fixtures do I need. So this reminds me of the disclaimers again, is that the calculator tool doesn't tell you how to hang the fixtures or place the fixtures. It doesn't tell you about light uniformity, and it's not a substitute for a professional lighting plan. So the spreadsheet then has a way to compare two different light fixtures. I guess I called them lamps here. I should change that to fixtures. So we have fixture 1 and fixture 2. You can input the data and the yellow highlighted boxes. And then it's going to run calculations on both fixture 1 and fixture 2, and then compare the two in terms of a simple payback in number of years. So let's run through a scenario where we have one lamp. Our lamp 1 on the left is low cost, but it's also somewhat low energy efficiency. So the PPE is 2.2 micromoles per joule. It costs $100 per fixture, and it outputs 64 micromoles per second. Lamp 2 is a more energy efficient fixture, so it uses a little bit more watts, but because it has very good energy efficiency, a PPE of 3.0 micromoles per joule, we get an output per fixture of 105 micromoles per second and a cost of $200. So the question for the growers, at least in terms of estimated back of the envelope kind of math, which one is going to make them be either cheapest in terms of its the cost of the fixtures or the cost of lighting over time? So we plug those into the lamp 1 tab and the lamp 2 tab. We're going to again assume 12 cents per kilowatt hour for electricity, lighting at 10,000 square feet, plant canopy, and 10% light loss to the edges. And what the tool tells us is that we would have to purchase 4,000 of the Fixture 1 bars or 2,500 of the Fixture 2 bars. Because the first bars are cheaper per bar at $100, their cost of the fixture is actually cheaper for that LED bar 1. So 404,000 versus 490,000. Then we look at their electrical cost, and as expected, because the second fixture is more energy efficient, we actually save kilowatt hours of electricity. We also save about $25,000 a year in our electrical cost. So then if you scroll to the bottom of this lamp 1 tab, the tool will give us summary statistics that compare lamp 1 versus lamp 2. So it tells us the cost to purchase the lamp in dollars per square foot, lamp 1 versus lamp 2. So lamp 2 is obviously more expensive, upfront cost. But then in terms of electricity cost, it's about $2.50 more per square foot per year for the electricity of lamp 1. So then we can calculate the simple payback of, if I pay more upfront to adopt lamp 2, how many years of running those fixtures for 18 hours a day will it take before I recoup that extra investment cost? And so the simple payback is simply calculated as that upfront difference in price divided by the annual electricity price difference. So in this case, with electricity at 12 cents per kilowatt hour, it would take us 3.5 years of operating those fixtures to realize the benefits of lamp 2. And then some of the utility of this tool is we can change different assumptions and see how that affects the math. So in this case, let's say we live in a part of the US where electricity is very cheap at 6 cents per kilowatt hour. So that cuts the cost of lighting per square foot per year down by half. It also doubles the payback. So now we're looking at a 7-year simple payback for adopting lamp 2 instead of lamp number 1. So that's all I have for the kind of simple to use cost calculator tool. Then I want to turn my attention and talk about some of the far red work that we've been doing at Cornell University under Project LAMP. And so this is work that's been led by PhD student Nate Ahlens. And just a little background on far red to get everybody on the same page. We know from the scientific literature that there are photosynthetic benefits of far red. So in particular, 700 to 750 nanometer photons have been shown to have equivalent efficacy to traditional photons. So there's this concept of extended PAR, or EPAR, where we should change our definition to include photons between 400 and 750 nanometers and weight them equally in terms of their photosynthetic capability. We also know that far red radiation affects the plant morphology, the shape of the plant, and in particular, it affects leaf and stem extension. So if we have expanded leaves, for example, which would be a shade tolerance response in nature, that wider leaf could help the plant capture more light. However, sometimes these could be beneficial, but sometimes these could be unwanted. Far red radiation can also promote earlier flowering, or in our vegetative crops, earlier bolting. So we'd want to balance far red benefits for photosynthesis and leaf extension against early flowering or bolting for our vegetative crops. So with this background in mind, the initial objectives of Nate's work were to determine if far red at the seedling stage enhances subsequent growth of lettuce and basil. And so our thought there is that the seedling stage, our plants are very close together. We have typically one seedling per square inch in growing cubes. And so this could be a place where growers, whether they're subsequently are going to finish the crop in a greenhouse or indoors, they could start their seedlings indoors when it's relatively cost effective to light the crop. And so the treatment setup that we had is we had this growth chamber with 12 different lighting areas that Nate very carefully set up. So there were 3 blocks so that we had statistical replication. And we have a background of white light that's at 200 micromoles per meter squared per second at 20 hours a day, giving us a daily light integral of 4.4 moles per meter squared per day. And then and then we have bars adding supplemental far red on top of that. And you can't even tell that they're on because our eyes are very poor at perceiving far red. However, if the white LEDs are turned off, you can see a little bit of the lighting treatment effect. So the white LEDs that we use to provide background light, they had 5 micromoles of far red total. So about 2% of the total photons were far red. And then we added supplemental far red at a total of 10, 20, or 30 micromoles. And that was at a peak of 736 nanometer. And so we grew them under these far red treatments for 10 days in the seedling stage. And then we transplanted them in a different chamber that had NFT channels, and that just had white light, giving us 17 moles of light per meter squared per day. So we wanted to see if there were effects both on the seedling stage, and then what we were hoping to see is these carryover effects where if we had seedlings with like a wider leaf surface area, for example, we would hope those seedlings would then capture more light and ultimately speed up either the days to harvest or give us greater crop biomass. Oh yes, okay, so those seedlings get transplanted and then they get grown on in that common environment. So here's what we found at the end of the transplant stage. So we found quantitative increase in biomass and leaf surface area, especially under 20 and 30 micromoles per meter squared per second of far red. And that carried through across the 3 different cultivars that we studied, Rex, Red Oak, and Grand Rapids. So then we transplanted them into that NFT chamber. Here's what they looked like in their randomized experimental design. And then we looked at them at the end of their crop cycle, their finishing cycle. And there may be some evidence quantitatively for a bit of an increase in biomass, but statistically it was not significant. So we saw these significant differences at the transplant stage, but those weren't apparent statistically by the end of the crop cycle. So the thought may be that far red may be required for a longer duration to get the full benefit, to see those carryover benefits to the finished stage. We also repeated this work on basil, and we used 3 different cultivars, Genovese, Prospera, and Spicy Bush. In this case, we also exposed them at the seedling stage for the first 5 days after germination or the first 10 days after germination. And there's a little bit of an indication for response at 5-day exposure, but really after 10 days, especially again at 20 and 30 micromoles, we saw benefits in terms of plant overall biomass and leaf surface area. Then if we grew those out to complete their harvest stage, we actually did see some carryover effects. So 20 or 30 micromoles of far red in the seedling stage led to an increase in fresh weight of 15 or 20%. So that could be a very valuable tool. So making sure that we have sufficient far red just at the seedling stage, in the case of basil, had some carryover effects. Then some of the newest work that Nate's been working on is applying far red during the whole crop cycle for lettuce. So for lettuce, just the seedling stage wasn't sufficient. So at both the seedling stage and the finishing stage, we had 2 different light treatments. So our white LED had 2% far red, in this case of the total photons. And then in our far red treatment, it also had the same total number of photons, but 20% of the photons were in far red. And then Nate has been looking at these growth response curves. So he's been doing destructive sampling of plants every 2 days. So we can look at that growth trajectory. And then in particular, we're interested in testing whether, so if we have increased leaf surface area, for example, is that due to the increased expansion of all the individual cells in the leaf, or is that due to an increased number of cells? And interestingly, scientifically, that question hasn't been answered for far red. So we'll see if this time lapse works. This is lettuce seedlings growing over 10 days with the far red treatment on the left, and our control treatment is on the right. Let me play that one more time. So the far red is on the left. And so we do see wider leaf expansion across that 10-day period of time. The interesting thing to me is we also see more leaf movement or kind of circadian rhythm responses in that the far red seedlings that are on the left as compared to the ones on the right. And then we also, I should say, we being Nate and another PhD student, Jake, also prepared this time lapse upon transplanting. And so here we have 23 days of growth. Again, the far red is on the left and the control is on the right. And you see the dramatic effect of 20% far red compared to 2% far red during the finishing cycle of lettuce. So when we look at some of the plant parameters, so a graphed leaf surface area over time, for example, so they were transplanted at day 15 after seeding and harvested at day 35. We saw, especially about a week in, there started to be a big separation between the treatments. And then by the end of the crop cycle, far red grown plants had about twice the leaf surface area, about 2,200 square centimeters versus about 11 or 1,200 square centimeters as for the control. And that also carried through for fresh weight as well. So we had about twice the fresh weight under far red versus the control treatment. So some clear far red effects. In terms of what's happening at a cellular level, Nate is still processing the data, but he tells me these are representative photos. These are the epidermal cells. The nice thing about epidermal cells is there's only one layer of cell, so it's pretty easy to visualize. These are both at 40x magnification, and it's leaf number 5, and it's at the end of the crop cycle, so day 35 after seeding. So the epidermal cells from our control plant are on the left side, and the far red plant are on the right side. So far we can see clear evidence that indeed we have increased elongation of those individual cells. So each cell is elongated and has overall bigger surface area per cell. So to conclude our far red work to date in this system, so with the original work with far red at the seedling stage, and where we had a background of 2% far red with the white LEDs, if we supplemented with 20 to 30 micromoles of far red, we initially did see increased leaf surface area and biomass of lettuce and basil. For lettuce, that did not carry through to harvest. For basil, those benefits did carry through to harvest. And then in this newest work for lettuce, where we provide far red for its entire crop cycle, where our treatment is 20% far red versus the control of 2% far red, we see about a doubling or 100% increase in leaf area and biomass. We're already seeing that there's some evidence that that's related to cell elongation, that leaf area response. And we still have work in progress now quantifying the number of cells at each layer and the cell size so that we can say more specifically about that in the future. And I would say these results were under sole source lighting. We and the scientific literature has also looked at the effects of far red in the greenhouse and tend to not see a lot of far red responses in greenhouse research. Sunlight already has 14% of its total EPAR photons as far red. So there's already a significant amount of far red that we're getting from sunlight. So I think one of the underlying questions is how much background far red do we have? And so typically in the greenhouse that would be sufficient, maybe under only very low ambient light background, like very low daily light integral conditions, do we occasionally see responses of far red light. So overall far red is this undervalued spectrum of light that I think is important in sole source lighting. All right, with that, I look forward to our discussion.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate Neil. Excellent information, useful information. Before turning the recording off, would you like to review one more time where we can find the tools?
Sure, go to hortlamp.org and then click on the outreach page and then go to the lighting calculator tool page.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.